Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high-performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that help you get to that next level of success in your life and business. My guest today is Linus Petersson, a technical biology engineer who has just recently co-founded the Swedish Longevity Cluster and who is on a mission to get as many people as possible interested in and working on the problem of solving aging. He's also the author of a new book whose title translates to Medicine Against Aging, How Modern Science Gives Us Unlimited Lifespan. Well, that sounds interesting, right? So welcome, Linus, and thank you so much for being on my show today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey guys, quick update before we get started. I've completed my 30-day Magic Mind Challenge. Woohoo! What an experience. I'm excited to share my final thoughts and overall experience with you today. So after a full month of Magic Mind, I can honestly say it's been transformative. My focus, productivity, and stress levels have all improved significantly. It's become an essential part of my daily routine and one that I actually look forward to because it not just works well, it also tastes pretty darn good. I get that the short form is handy, but boy, I'd also happily drink a bigger bottle. Anyway, as you know, I love experimenting and testing new things, and this has definitely been a successful experiment. For those of you high achievers out there who would like to increase their performance in a healthy way, I definitely recommend you give this productivity shot a try. With ingredients that are third-party tested and backed by science, it's a reliable addition to any routine. So if you want to experience Magic Mind risk-free for yourself, visit magicmind.com/ClaudiaG and use code ClaudiaG20 to get up to 48% of your first subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase. So don't miss out. You'll love it. Without further ado, let's begin today's episode. Linus, why do you want to become the longevity guy in Swedish media? Why is this important to you?
Well, I suppose it sort of traces back to my sort of my story as a teenager, like where it all began. I had this sort of existential crisis, like what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of the universe? And like, why are we all here? And I started reading like a lot of philosophy, but eventually I found science, like the scientific method. So basically like empiricism. I'm like, this is awesome stuff. And then I read something from the American physicist, Richard Feynman. And he said something to the effect that there are no laws of physics that we know of that prevents us from extending the healthy lifespan of a mammal indefinitely. So what he basically said that, yeah, it's possible to stop aging, to sort of, if you will, treat aging as it were a disease. And I was kind of blown away, you know, being 17 and just like trying to understand like, how does the world work? I was like, wow, that's an important fact. And so then I started reading lots of like physics, and eventually, you know, going down the ladder of sort of how certain we can know things, sort of like chemistry, biology. And when I came to biology, I tried to understand, like, okay, why do we age? You know, at the technical level, like a cellular level, like what molecule is sort of what is happening? And this was like 20 years ago. So this was before the hallmarks. So there's a now famous paper called The Hallmarks of Aging that sort of describes what aging is at the cellular level. But that paper hadn't been published yet. So 20 years ago, we didn't really have a great scientific understanding what aging was. And I'm like, okay, that sucks. And, you know, being a teenager and like 20, I wasn't really trained or capable to sort of assessing the science. But from what I could tell, like we were nowhere near to solving this problem. And it was like for sure never going to happen in my lifetime. But I thought just, man, this is the most important thing I could ever hope to work on. So I'm like, no, I have to do this, so that's why I started. I'm like, okay, where can I learn more about this stuff? So I started reading technical articles, and this was like the reason why I chose to be an engineer in technical biology, because I'm like, okay, I need to understand how cells and all this DNA stuff, how does that work? And could it be engineered? Could it be, like changed to extend our healthy lifespan? So that's sort of what put me on this path. Yeah,
Curiosity.
that's the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that. So maybe can you just clarify for us, what is aging and what are the hallmarks of aging?
Yeah, obviously. So so it depends on what level you want to describe it, but to begin with, we have a sort of a theoretical understanding that comes from evolutionary biology. So you might ask sort of naively, like, why aren't we sort of immortal? Why haven't evolution given us unlimited lifespan? And this comes down to external threats to any organism. So there is always the risk of infectious disease or accidents or predators. So any species, any organism has to sort of balance reproduction and repair. So repair in this context means sort of repairing all the DNA and protein damage that accumulates in every instance. So our cells have internal repair mechanisms that most of the time fixes these things. Now, from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense to sort of have an organism be healthy, to have sort of a high and good working repair mechanisms up until the point that you have reproduced. And then this sort of evolutionary pressure decreases. And this is why we are sort of healthy until after sort of reproductive age. So like the sort of deterioration of the body and the exponential increase in risk of disease sort of kicks in somewhere, I don't know, about 40, and then at 60 it sort of really takes off. So this is the theoretical evolutionary reason why we age. Now it's very interesting to observe other species. There are other species that do not age, in the sense that the risk of dying or the risk of getting a disease does not increase with chronological age, as it does in Homo sapiens, in our species. So we have, for example, turtles. They don't sort of age. We have sort of lobsters. There are a whole range of these species. And also, when you observe nature, you very quickly realize that, well, the mean lifespan of species are different. I mean, it's obvious. It differs from minutes to millennia, really. And this is also sort of a proof of concept. Well, if other species can live much longer than humans, and remember, we all have an evolutionary common ancestor. It's sort of a lot of the same genes and proteins are at work in our cells as in other organisms. So it stands to reason, like, it should be possible to do something about this at a very fundamental sort of observational thing, when you sort of observe other species in nature. So that's the evolutionary reason. And then the hallmarks, of course. So what exactly is going on in the cells then? So this question was partly answered in 2013 with the publication of The Hallmarks of Aging, which is just this wonderful article that is, if anybody's interested in this topic, you can just Google it and sort of check it out. Everybody talks about the hallmarks. So what are the hallmarks? So there are about a dozen different molecular mechanisms that we believe cause us to age. So I don't have time to sort of go through them all in detail, but I can give you like one example just to sort of, so you get a feel for it. So one thing is senescent cells. So a senescent cell is basically an aged cell. So for example, we have them in all parts of our tissues. So we have sort of senescent heart cells, senescent skin cells, senescent brain cells. And a senescent cell, it doesn't perform its original function anymore. So if you have a heart cell, for example, it doesn't contribute. It doesn't do its job anymore, right? But it survives. So it's sort of like a zombie cell. Sometimes they're called zombie cells, and people like that. It's funny. So they linger in the tissue, but they accumulate, they increase with age. So eventually you have like, I don't know, about 10% or something, depends on species and tissue and a lot of other factors. But a significant fraction of our cells when we age are these senescent cells. Now, so the solution is quite simple. So when we in mice selectively eliminate, when we remove these cells, the mice live longer and they're healthier. So it's like, okay, this is awesome stuff. So there are now a lot of companies that are developing drugs sort of targeting these cells. So from cancer research and cancer sort of cancer medications, we've become quite good at selectively killing cancer cells. So we can use those tools, those techniques, and target the senescent cells instead. And this is exactly what's going on. So these so-called senolytica, drugs that kill senescent cells, they are being developed by several companies right now, and we are doing sort of trials in humans. So the development process is quite far along. So this is one of like perhaps a dozen different hallmarks.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. What are the targets on the cells to identify those slacker zombie cells? So
right.
the more muscular target on the cell, I mean.
Yes, so they have a specific. So if you're familiar with cell biology, so the cell is defined by the cell membrane, and on the cellular membrane, or like through the cellular membranes, there are a bunch of proteins that characterize that is one part of characterizing what type of cell it is. And these sort of senescent cells, these zombie cells, they have a specific receptor profile, and they are very well defined within the scientific literature. So we know exactly what they are.
So you can target a combination of those receptors, or is it one prominent one that you can target?
It's more as far as I know, it's not a single one, and you can sort of there are many ways to skin this cat, basically. So there's not like one specific one, but you can attack them many different ways. So perhaps a combination of receptor molecules, or you can do there are many other ways, and it remains to be determined what's the most sort of effective way to remove these senescent cells. And it'll also probably be different for different tissues. So if you want to do this in the brain, you have to sort of cross the blood-brain barrier. And there's a lot of specifics.
New difficulties, to get the drug where it's supposed to go. Do you really believe in unlimited lifespan? Do you believe that humans could become immortal eventually?
Short answer is yes, but let's unpack that a bit. So I'm not too fond of the term immortal, because it sort of suggests that you cannot die, and this is not that's not what we're trying to do. But what we are trying to do is to definitely achieve unlimited lifespan, or indefinite lifespan. So not just being healthy until you're like 90 or 100 or whatever. So what I advocate in my book is that the goal of our field should be indefinite lifespan extension. Now, this has been a controversial, and to some degree still is a controversial goal or proposition. Most researchers are sort of comfortable talking about health span, which is sometimes defined as the healthy part of life, right?
Exactly.
And if you were to sort of advocate for a health span position, you'd say that, oh, you want to be healthy until you're like 90 or something. You want to travel, play with your grandchildren, and then sort of die in your sleep, and that's considered success. There's no suffering here. Now, for a long time, I thought that was a sort of reasonable and good goal. But when I started to really think about this, I'm like, okay, why stop? I mean, there's no evolution is just a sort of, in some sense, it's a random fact that we have the lifespan we have. Other species don't have an expiration date. Why should we accept evolutionary coincidence? It doesn't really make sense to me. And then I started thinking about the philosophical and ethical questions here, and I sort of realized that, oh well, there are 110,000 people, 110,000 that die every day on our planet as a whole due to aging. In total, there are about 150,000. So this is like 70 to 90%, depending on which country you take. This is massive, and I have yet to find a good reason why we should accept these deaths. In my mind, it's sort of the same when an old person dies as a sort of a young person, basically, because I know for a fact that we will very, very soon. Well, we will eventually. I'm not gonna promise a date. That's impossible to do. But eventually, we will solve aging. There's no question in my mind about that. I mean, and no serious scientists sort of contends this point anymore. Now that we have the hallmarks and everything. I can talk a lot about like timelines as well, and there are a bunch of caveats to this. But basically, we will solve aging, and this means that a 85-year-old could, in theory, live hundreds of years more, and so their lives sort of they become very, very valuable. And these are real people. We shouldn't just accept that they're gonna die when we know we can do something about it. Because sort of if you backtrack a little bit, like maybe 20, certainly 30 years ago, this was not a tractable problem. It's like it was not reasonable to assume that we would solve the problem of aging within our lifetime, right? And in a situation like that, it sort of makes sense to say, "Oh, carpe diem, enjoy the day." We gotta sort of enjoy life the best as we can, and try not to think too much about the fact that we're all gonna die. And this is it's a kind of absurd situation we find ourselves in, and I don't think we should accept. I know this is sort of a unusual philosophical position to take, but I think life is good and death is bad. I mean, it's super simple. When you put it like that, it's like, yeah, obviously, isn't that right? But like everything we do, we're trying to extend our healthy lifespan. So I don't think this is a crazy position when you in a calm and rational way sort of think about this. And if you're into philosophy, I can highly recommend my friend Patrick Linden. He has written. He's a philosopher. He has written a book called "The Case Against Death," and he takes a philosopher's view on this, and sort of here are the arguments. Here's why they don't sort of make sense. No, it seems that life is good and death probably is bad. So we should do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, even though if you don't have to sort of agree with this, you can still think that, okay, maybe sometime, eventually, when I'm super, super old, sometime, death is okay. But, aging is the root cause of practically all major diseases, if you exclude the infectious diseases, which we already have vaccines and antibiotics to deal with. But we haven't sort of made progress on age-related diseases in the same way. So, for example, heart disease, dementia, or most forms of cancer. Now, these diseases have at the root cause aging itself. So there's something called the neuroscience hypothesis, and this is basically the idea that if we fix aging at a cellular level, we will prevent the onset of all these age-related diseases, and we can extend life indefinitely. Now, to sort of circle back to your original question, like immortality, like is that the goal? Well, no, we will not become immortal. What will happen is that, so today a 10-year-old has the least risk of dying in the following year. So when you sort of celebrate your 10th birthday, the chances that you will not live to your 11th birthday is like 1 in 11,000. Okay, so it's like super, super low, right? But if you consider an 85-year-old, the risk of dying is in the year to come is like 1 in 6. So it's like rolling a dice, basically. Now, if we develop these therapies or medicines that I advocate we do, what will happen is that we will sort of flatten this curve. So the risk of dying for an 85-year-old will be the same as for a 10-year-old. Okay, and you can always sort of be hit by a bus, or you could get an infectious disease or whatever. Those are problems we have to solve separately. But like most people today die of aging. Like we don't sort of mentally view it this way most of the time. We say, oh, grandma died. What did she die of? Well, cancer. And I was like, no, it's not really true. She died of aging, because aging was the root cause of that cancer. But this is not something that is sort of a widely understood. And this is why I say, yeah, indefinite lifespan extension should be the goal. There is no reason to accept suffering or illness or death. And we should do all in our power to stop this. That's my view on this.
That's super interesting, because I'm quite torn on this. So I totally agree on the health span thing. Who wants to live forever if their quality of life sucks? So we should definitely improve health span. But when it comes to indefinite lifespan, I'm not so sure, because there's so many layers. There's ethical, social, spiritual. I mean, doesn't death paradoxically give meaning to one's existence? Because it kind of forces you to prioritize and ask the hard questions, like, who do I want to be, and what do I want to do with the short amount of time that I've been given? And also, aren't we running out of resources if everyone lives to 1,000 years? I don't know. How do you think about that?
Yeah, you raised some very common objections to stopping aging. So I've considered all the points you raised here, and a bunch of others as well in the book. And what I do is I sort of very systematically investigate these points. I mean, if it was the case that, for example, so many people claim that stopping aging would be unnatural, and therefore it would be unethical, and we shouldn't do it. Now, I sort of explore this question, and I say, okay, but what exactly do you mean by unnatural? There's no such thing as a unnatural carbon atom and a natural one. Unnatural one would be sort of in my table, and a natural one would be in the tree outside. But if you take a physics approach to these problems, these atoms are literally identical. There is they are literally identical. There's no difference at all between them. So sort of the concepts of natural and unnatural, they're not really scientific. And in that sense, they are sort of, well, in a scientific sense, they're meaningless. They don't contribute to anything. But we have this sort of idea that something natural is good. And, products are often advertised as, yeah, it's natural, and therefore it's good, so you should buy my product. But, a product's properties is determined by its chemical properties. And it's just chemistry. The origin doesn't matter, right? And if you sort of take a step back, there's very easy to sort of list a bunch of examples of sort of natural things that are good. So, cancer medication in children. I have yet to hear anyone sort of advocate that, no, these children should not receive their medication because it's unnatural. It's like, yeah, obviously this is a good thing to do. And all of medicine really is sort of unnatural, really our whole civilization. And I think, I love humanity. I think we are great despite all our faults. I think, we have literature, we have culture, we have science, we have beauty, we have art, we have done amazing things. We landed on the moon, for Christ's sake. So I think, people sometimes have a sort of a dim view of humanity and humans. I'm not in that camp. I think we're awesome. We have a lot of problems for sure, but we'll fix them. You got to be optimist. We have solved problems before. We can do this. We solved infectious disease mainly with vaccines and antibiotics. We can do the same thing with age-related diseases. We can prevent a lot of suffering. So yeah, so this is sort of, so what we're talking about here is sort of ethical considerations.
One thing, I think it's not really about natural or not natural or non-natural. In this case, what I'm more worried about is just shifting the suffering. If we run out of resources and we start killing each other even more, that's well, we might not die of aging, we might just die of violence.
Right. Yeah. So what you raise here is sort of the overpopulation / resource scarcity issue. Now, this is not going to happen. This is the most important, or not important, but the most common objection. Now, I've been trying to sort of think of a sort of a punchline, or like a very short way to answer this question, but I have yet to come up with a good one. Okay, but let me try this. so overpopulation and resource scarcity, will this be a problem if we solve aging? The short answer is no, it will not be a problem. Why? Well, first of all, it will take a long time for us to develop these drugs. So I work in the pharmaceutical industry, and like the mean time for us to develop one drug is 10 years, and it costs between $1 and $3 billion US. Okay, and we have about 40 clinical trials that are on the way right now, but they are for a specific age-related disease, so they will not completely solve aging. So most likely we will need a whole battery, like a dozen maybe different drugs that target all these different hallmarks. So first of all, it will take a long time. Okay, so right now the effect on population is zero. It's nothing. Okay, zero. And then eventually, like the first generation of longevity drugs, or anti-aging drugs, if you will, they will extend the mean healthy lifespan of a population a little bit, a month maybe, 3 months, something like that. Okay, so the effect will there will be some effect, but it will be very, very small in the beginning. Okay, and then there have been population sort of demographic modeling done based on that I reference in my book right here. So what two Russian scientists did, they took the UN population models and they sort of tweaked it to see what would happen if everyone above age 65 stopped dying from age-related causes, okay, and sort of lived indefinitely. And they had two main findings. The first one was that it takes a very long time to grow old. So it takes decades. Getting kids or creating new kids is super easy and fast. Okay, so sort of fertility rates have a much larger impact on total population than stopping aging. Okay, so the effect would be very, very, very slow, right? And also the effect is very limited. So over like a century, if you control for all other changes in population, the effect would be at maximum 20%. In this paper that I referenced. This is counterintuitive. Most people don't think that this would be the case. Okay, but if you look at the numbers, yeah, that's what happens. And the main reason is that it takes a long time to grow old. It doesn't take a year, it takes decades, right? And if you sort of step back and you think about this more intuitively, well, not everybody will use these drugs, right? Like there have been two major surveys, and in both these surveys, 2013 by the Pew Research Institute in the United States, and another one in 2021, over half, a majority, more than 50%, said that no, even if these drugs were perfect and had no side effects and they extended my life indefinitely, I would not take them. For whatever reason, they would just not take them. Now, 50%. I was very surprised when I saw these statistics. Now, my personal guess is that when push comes to shove, when these, I think people will probably, more than 50% will probably use them. But the fact remains, if you take people at their word, some amount of people will not use these drugs for like irrational religious reasons, or like rational ethical reasons, or whatever. It doesn't matter what the reason is. Some people will not use them. And also all non-age related deaths would still remain. We would still have infectious disease. We would still have accidents. We would still have wars and stuff like that. We would not become immortal. Okay, so what would happen is that we would sort of cancer and dementia would be as common as malaria is today in developed countries. So there's so much suffering, and disease would be alleviated, would simply disappear, or technically not disappear. So cancer would still remain. So for example, cancer in children, that frequency would most likely not be changed by longevity drugs, but for 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds, they would. And these 80 and 90-year-olds, they would look just like 20-year-olds today. We will give these drugs, and you would sort of it will become quite spectacular when we do this. You could it'll happen gradually, of course, but the fact of the matter is that like a 90-year-old will look just as a 20-year-old, and critically, and like this is the point, they will get diseases at the same low risk as a 20-year-old. And a 90-year-old can sort of run a marathon, travel the world, get a second education, do a lot of great things. Enjoy life. So this is my attempt to answer the overpopulation question. It will not sort of break civilization. And sort of one final point on this topic is that world population will implode very soon. If you look at the population projections by the United Nations, we will reach a peak in a few decades, and then it will just implode. So the population will decrease just as fast as it has increased for the past couple of, well, really 300 years, but more like 50 years, really. Now, this will be a super big problem for all nations, and perhaps you've started seeing these headlines right now that, fertility rates are super low, and why aren't people having children anymore? So this is like a big ocean-going vessel. It takes a long time to sort of change fertility dynamics, and now they've shifted for quite a long time. So people aren't really getting kids anymore. We're not even at replacement rate, and this is 30 years after this, absolute numbers will start to decrease. So a solution to the sort of population implosion would be to keep the current people alive and healthy. So I think this is actually a solution to the problem. It will not be overpopulation that we're faced with. It will be underpopulation. Yeah, and this is not really intuitive.
But then you will have those 80-year-olds will still need to have babies at age 80 to keep the numbers up.
Yeah,
if that's true.
Well, not necessarily. They just will, like, if they don't die, or if they die at the same low rate as 10-year-olds via longevity medicine, then you could in theory have a stable population, and that sort of seems, well, I think it sort of seems reasonable to try to have a somewhat stable population. And like a final point on the overpopulation question. It doesn't really matter how many people you have if your methods of production and consumption are not sustainable. We could have 1 billion people on the planet, and it still wouldn't make sense. So, and we do have enough resources to make the whole world sustainable with, many billions of people if we use the right technologies. So, solar panels, wind power, batteries, sort of reform the food production system and so forth. So this is definitely a solvable problem.
Yeah, it probably should go hand in hand with those medical advances. Like, you can't solve one and then think about, well, sustainability is not really working. So you should probably develop those things like at the same time, so you're prepared when this comes true. And I mean, I always think about this cool study. I've seen this. It was some sort of mouse study where they had this old gray mouse, and what did they do? I can't remember which paper it was. Anyway, they changed something and they reversed aging basically, and then the mouse looked young again. It's kind of like, wow, this is really, I mean, it's working in mice. So who knows?
Yeah, no, it will happen. I think I know the paper you're referring to. So there was a paper of this is a drug called rapamycin. Now,
was it that one?
Possibly, yes. There have been like many people. There are a lot of things that work in mice.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm like, why aren't more people investing in this? It's like kind of crazy. So rapamycin is a drug that normally it's approved by the FDA, and it's normally used in patients with organ transplants to repress the immune system. But it also has these amazing longevity properties. Now, I gotta mention here that there has not been sort of a major large study with thousands of people, double-blind, placebo-controlled, that without a doubt determines that rapamycin extends the healthy lifespan in humans. That has not been done. So we can't know for sure that this drug works. So I need to say that very, very clearly. We have 0 approved medications for aging right now. With that said, there is a lot of promising evidence that rapamycin do work, and there are a lot of sort of prominent researchers that advocate that you should probably take rapamycin. Sort of the they have looked at the evidence and concluded, yeah, it's more likely than not that this drug actually works.
Are you taking it?
No, I am not. So perhaps this is a good opportunity to say, like, what can you do right now to extend your healthy lifespan? So in my book, I try to sort of take a very I've taken a look at the literature, done a sort of a literature review of what's out there, and I'm sorry to say it's quite boring, but what you can do that there's super a lot evidence for is physical exercise. This is sort of probably the most important thing. It doesn't matter exactly what you do, but if you run, if you go for a brisk walk, or if you swim, lift weights, whatever, if you do that maybe 30 minutes a day, you would have a lot of health benefits. So that's what I try to do. I try to go for a run every evening, or do something else. This has a lot of evidence. I know this is not something it's not new, it's not news to anyone. But that said, I mean, there's super a lot of evidence for that. Secondly, diet, like what you eat, really matters. Now, we don't know exactly what the optimal diet is, and in my opinion, people sort of overthink this a lot. And it's food is sort of cultural, and we have a very strong and emotional relationship to food, and there are 1,001 different diets out there, and people sort of advocate different diets. Now, the reason we have so many diets is that we don't have sort of a smoking gun evidence for what's the perfect one. If we did, there would be like one or like a few. With that said, we do know enough to make some recommendations here. Now, I usually say that like if I were to give like one sentence advice, what should you eat? I think vegetarian, like being a vegetarian, is probably the best simple proxy we have now for a good and healthy diet. Now, I can talk a lot about this, but it's not dangerous to eat meat once in a while. But if you want to have a simple rule to follow, being a vegetarian is probably like the easiest one to do. And it doesn't have to be like 100%, like 95 is totally fine, no problem. So that's important. Like that's the second thing you can do. And then the third thing is to make sure you get enough sleep. Now, if you're sort of an entrepreneur and you're working hard, this can sometimes be a problem. But prioritize getting enough sleep. It is very important. The body recovers when we sleep. And then perhaps in this context, I can also add that a fourth thing would be to have a low chronic stress. Now, if you're an entrepreneur like me, now this is not easy. I for sure I understand this, and it's okay to sort of stress like a few weeks at a time or something, but like over long periods of time, like years, it's detrimental to have a sort of a low burning stress like all the time. So like taking a holiday is actually can be quite a good idea. Sort of just recharge the batteries, stuff like this. Now that's about it. There are 0 approved interventions for aging by the FDA. Some people are really interested in supplements. Now, supplements are they are a little tricky. Now, supplements, they have to prove that they are not toxic. Okay, you cannot be sort of hurt by them, but they do not have to prove efficiency. So when you have a supplement, like if you have a drug, you have to go to the FDA and you have hardcore studies like proving that effects. You can't just sell a drug and like not prove what it does. But you can do this with supplements, right? So therefore, practically now there are corner cases, and there are some supplements can be very useful in specific instances. And I'm not saying they're all bad; they're certainly not. But for the most part, we don't know if they work, right? So this is not like if your goal is indefinite life extension, supplements aren't going to get you there. And I have to say in this context as well, sort of lifestyle interventions, what I just said, exercise, diet, sleep, and low stress. These things, on average, will give you about a decade of extra healthy lifespan, but they will not give you indefinite life extension. We know that one for sure. So what I do is like, okay, I try to do that stuff, and then I don't focus on it. I focus on hardcore drug development or more advanced therapies. And I try to sort of help this field to get off the ground, basically, because everything will be determined by drug development, and if we can sort of develop these advanced therapies in a timely manner.
So what are your thoughts on that growing longevity industry? What trends are you excited and or concerned about?
Oh, that's a great question. So as I sort of alluded to in the beginning of our conversation, so 10 years ago, before the publication of the Hallmarks of Aging, there were basically 0 companies. There was no industry at all. And I was kind of super depressed. I'm like, yeah, we're all going to die, basically. we're going to grow old. We're going to sort of get age-related diseases, and we will suffer, and we will die, and that's it, right? Today, it's like completely different. There are about 180 to 200 companies, depending on how you classify them, that are developing these drugs targeting aging itself. So I'm super happy about this. There are about 40 clinical studies where we test these drugs in humans. So we are quite far along in the development process. I was just in Denmark and at this at ARDD, so I think it's Aging Research and Drug Discovery Conference, which is by far the largest longevity conference in the world. And I've been going to these conferences for a while now, and this year it's kind of exploded. There were like 1,000 people there, something like a lot of people, and the science is finally sort of advancing. We know enough to do drug development right now, and investors are getting really interested in the space to invest in longevity biotech. So there are a lot of good trends. So this is awesome. I'm super happy, and I'm trying to do my part to sort of accelerate this further. So if anyone sort of wants to go into this field, I'd be super happy to take a call and like, yeah, what are you trying to do? What's your background? And try to match you with great people or investors, for that matter, if you're trying to start a company. I'm here to help, basically. Okay, so that's the optimistic view. Now, for the pessimistic view, we are currently not on track to solve aging within a reasonable amount of time. If you would sort of force me to guess, I'd say maybe 40, 50 years at current sort of resource allocation. And when I say resource allocation, I mean fundamental, like how much money do we spend on aging research? Currently, for example, in the US, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, spends like 0.1% of their resources on fundamental aging biology. It's nothing, right? It's like $300 million a year. It's nothing. Okay, we need to, this is, yeah, I'm super frustrated about this because if we could solve aging, we would solve all these other age-related diseases, most likely. So the current paradigm is just super inefficient. Like if we were to sort of solve magically cancer, all forms of cancers, like today, the mean life span of the population would increase like 1, maybe 2 years, because you would just get another age-related disease and suffer and die from that one. Okay, so this is sort of like a whack-a-mole. The current approach doesn't work, right? So we need to go after the root cause itself, aging, and that's how we solve this problem. So
more funding.
More research funding, that's for sure, and also sort of venture capital funding into the longevity biotech space. I mean, there are so many interesting companies right now that are developing drugs that do have super great potential. And like, okay, imagine this. Imagine if you're developing a drug and you find out that, yeah, this drug can be given to a healthy individual and it will extend that person's life by, say, 4 months, something like that, 4 or 5 months or something, like a small amount. Now, that drug would be a super global smash hit. I mean, this company would be worth more than Apple in an overnight. Because think what this would mean. It would mean that everybody on the planet would want to have this drug. Would you like to be healthy longer? Here, take it. I mean, you have to do the exercise and diet and that stuff. But once you've done that, if you take this drug, you can expect to live an extra 6 months. I mean, how much would you pay for that? They could charge whatever they like, and people will still pay it. So there's a huge financial opportunity here. And there was a lot of interesting speculation in Denmark. So I talked to a lot of sort of VCs and PIs, sort of primary investigators, those who are sort of the scientists that are doing this. And most people think that, yeah, right now we have 0 interventions, but once we get the first intervention, this field will just be flooded by capital. So right now there's an opportunity for investors to sort of move into the space, and there's relatively low competition. So if you're an investor, please consider checking out the longevity space.
Yeah, get in early.
Yeah, sure.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, sure. Like if you, so I do public speaking. So if you think this is kind of interesting and you want to hear me talk, reach out to me. I'd be super happy to come and speak. And if you're sort of attracted to what I'm talking about here, if you're like, whoa, yeah, aging really seems to be tractable, and I want to do something about this. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd be super happy to sort of connect you with those that sort of make sense. And also I have to sort of advertise here for something called the Longevity Biotech Fellowship. So LBF, Longevity Biotech Fellowship. And this is an onboarding organization for talent into the longevity field. So if you're a researcher, if you're a PhD student, if you're an investor, if you are an entrepreneur, and you want to do something, but you don't know, like, what do I do? Like, where do I start? You can join this organization. And what they do is that they host sort of super intensive retreats where you get to meet like the top scientists, investors, entrepreneurs, like people like you who want to do something about this problem. And the co-founders of LBF are Mark Hamalainen and Nathan Chen. They are super driven people, and they have a bunch of contacts in all over the world. So yeah, I can recommend that.
Oh, that sounds amazing. So where can listeners find you online if they would like to learn more about this or connect with you?
I usually use like LinkedIn. So I think that's a great place to get in touch with me. Just write a message and I'll get back to you.
Fantastic. Linus, thank you so much for talking and for sharing all those tips and insights with us today. This was fun.
Likewise. Love to be here. Thanks, Claudia.
Take care and talk soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please take a sec to rate and review my show or share it with a friend. That way you can support the show and help me reach and support other entrepreneurs like yourself as well. If you would like my help to figure out how you can go from overwhelmed and overworked hustler to empowered and confident leader, check out my website at www.wiredforsuccess.solutions and book a free 20-minute strategy session with me. Can't wait to help you get wired for success. Until next time, take care. Bye.